Hello everyone, I'm Tracy and I'm here with Shane. In today's video, we're going to be going into the severe flooding that we're seeing all around the world, not just here in the US, but we're also seeing this happen in Southeast Australia as well as Western Europe. We're going to really delve into the situation, the massive and severe flooding that had hit Roswell, New Mexico, and kind of go into what's going on there. And we're going to try to make some election connections. And we also just got word there's another hurricane about to hit possibly the East Coast or Florida on election day. The name of the hurricane is now Patty. Before we get started, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so before you leave. And like, comment, and share this video so we can let as many people know what's really going on. And a lot of this information is being censored. It was very hard to find images, footage, witness reports coming from these incidences that we're going to talk about today. So again, we're going to focus on the Roswell flooding. So I'll let Shane play some really incriminating evidence that we've gotten from Into Thin Air.
We know weather modification is just a theory, we are just spitballing here, but I want to show you something that has to do with the flooding that has taken place in New Mexico, and I'm going to show you an example where you can literally see weather being created over Area 51. It then gets shot with radar beams and then turns into a storm a few hundred miles in size, and you see it flow right through Arizona and into New Mexico. My friends, check this out. Alright, so now I have this full clip that we can break down and you might be able to understand a little bit more. So this is what's happening here. We have a radar anomaly popping up, and as you can see, this is taking place directly over Area 51. So that's where this is originating from. These dots are being dropped over Area 51 and then shot with these lasers. And just to get everyone oriented, you can see right here, it is directly over Area 51. This is not made up. This is actually being dropped over that private property. And now we're going to go into detail and watch how they enhance it in real time. We're going to be watching this little speckle anomaly, and you're going to see it get zapped 2 different times. I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and you're going to see 2 zaps hit it, and just as that happens, another part of this begins to peel off. Watch this. 1, 2. And as soon as that happens, this part peels right off. Let's backtrack, and you're going to see the 2 beams. Here is 1 right there. There is the second right there. And then watch as this little system here gets bigger with a piece of it trailing off right after the beams hit it. This is unbelievable stuff, and you could see that it's also being shot from different radar towers as it scoots across the states here. Now keep in mind how big this is. This is an entire state right here. This is Nevada. Let's backtrack and see how big this thing gets over time. It begins as just these little dots. It gets hit with that double zap, and then here we go. Watch how this thing changes. Watch how fast it's moving, and you can see it being hit all the way back and forth. So let's do it again. All the way back to the beginning. We'll start with the first beam right here and the creation of these little specks. There was absolutely no moisture or any weather in this area whatsoever. Keep in mind, this is Nevada and Southern California. And we move forward again. Zap number 1. There is zap number 2. We begin the peel off phase, and then it just begins to get bigger and bigger. And you can see other towers hitting it from different places as it passes by. Just a very weird anomaly that I caught, and it seemingly shows a system being created from nothing. Watch, if we backtrack another frame, this thing disappears. There's nothing there. The very next frame, we get the dots in the first beam, and then we see it get hit and hit over and over again, even from down in this area, and then boom, we have a full-fledged weather system created from little specks over Area 51. It's a low-pressure system right here, literally spinning counterclockwise for multiple days in the same spot. It does not move. This alone is very rare to have a stalled-out system just sitting for days, specifically in the southwest of the United States. My friends, I've proven over and over that weather manipulation is real, and they do it all the time. In fact, it's on the NOAA website. You can go read about it yourself, and they explain what you need to do if you want to do your own weather modification.
All right, so I thought that was really, really good evidence, and something I just, dawned on me. I don't know if I just been missing it, but Area 51 and Roswell are 2 different areas, right? But somehow I thought they were like in the same area, like the crash and Area 51 are one kind of in the same area.
Area 51's in Nevada, and Roswell is in southeastern New Mexico.
So the supposed crash is in Roswell, and they supposedly took it to Area 51. Is that
allegedly
the story? Yeah. You would think I know. I studied this, but
either that or it was reverse engineered at
yeah, I don't believe it was an alien craft that lost control, but it was, I just realized they're not close to each other. But
Yeah.
having like Area 51 and Roswell in the same conversation just reminds me of a famous UFO supposed crash. Okay, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things I wanted to point out. I just want to make a correction where he said they were getting hit by laser beams. Technically, those skinny beams are not really lasers. Those are just beam formed. Like NexRads can actually make a skinny beam, but it still spreads out in a cone. So it's technically not a laser, even though there's very little loss of signal over a long distance. It still spreads out in a cone. It's just a very narrow cone. They
So
can
those
actually
were like the direction or giving it energy. What do you think those beams were doing?
Okay. So a single beam often is usually probably a single narrow beam like that is probably just used for perhaps ionospheric heating or to intersect with another beam to cause an interference pattern. Those interference patterns often produce what are called plane waves, which show up in the radar signature and in the clouds as what they call, meteorologists call, atmospheric gravity wave clouds. But technically, those gravity wave clouds are also most often produced in modern times by interference patterns between two beams. There are natural occurrences that happen from the contours of like the mountains and stuff, but when we see stuff like that over the ocean, there is no land contour effect that could produce that. And most often when we see patterns like that, it's from interference patterns of the NexRad towers.
Right. And then we did see those patterns over the ocean right before the Maui fire, those gravity waves.
We did. Yeah, they were very prominent over Maui right before the fire. And usually you do see those gravity waves as being parallel lines that are perpendicular to the direction of travel of the wind.
Right.
And so you'll find that quite often. All right. So now I want to go into some of the damage that happened in Roswell. Well, actually, I will cover some of the stats first. So in Roswell alone, over 5.8 inches of rain actually fell. But in some of the higher elevations, due to the topography, almost 7 inches of rain fell in some areas, which is it's a lot to happen in a 24-hour period. But especially because of the topography, the water collected in the low-lying areas, just like it did in North Carolina. All right. So also, just like in North Carolina, we had vehicles that were washed into bridges. You can see these are sport utility vehicles that were picked up and carried by the water and then deposited against the bridge. Now you can see the water has receded some in this photo. And then here's a bunch of cars kind of piled up because they were all pushed together by the water. This did happen a lot. And we don't have footage of it, but there was the Chavez County Sheriff was also trapped on top of his vehicle as it was swept away along with other vehicles. And then here is some more of the flooding that happened in Roswell. Now, this is actually somewhat shallow compared to other places because we have seen water up to the windows of both vehicles and homes. As you could tell by the previous bridge here, the water was at a very high level in some places. All right, so one other thing I want to show, now that we're going to switch gears slightly, is New Mexico House Bill 130. So this bill is relating to cloud seeding. They have a cloud seeding operation that's been going on since, I think, 2022. And they actually got their contract renewed this year in 2024. So I think in April of 2024, the contract was renewed. However, certain counties that were originally included had protested the cloud seeding experiments. And so 2 counties were actually excluded from the new contract. I do have a little information that I want to show in some of these video clips that I have. This one is from a newscast about the bill and the cloud seeding.
A plan for cloud seeding in drought-stricken southeastern New Mexico has been given the go-ahead. The Interstate Stream Commission approved the plan by the company's Seeding Operations and Atmospheric Research, or SOAR, based in Texas. The seeding involves airplanes injecting silver iodide into certain clouds. It then leads to ice crystal formation, which then could lead to rainfall. Now, the counties affected by this seeding would be Chavez, Curry, DeBaca, Lee, Quay, and Roosevelt counties, which, as you can see, are suffering extreme and exceptional drought. This is the latest drought map released last week. Now, environmentalists have expressed concerns about cloud seeding, saying they don't know the effects on the ecosystem yet.
All right.
And then really quick, because I was waiting for you to say it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the amount of rain that Roswell got is a record from 1901. So it's
Yeah,
123 years since it's rained that much in Roswell, right?
right. Yeah. So this was like 5.8 inches of rain and exceeds the previous record of like 5.6, which was set 123 years ago in 1901.
Probably when
I
they
believe it
first
was
started measuring rain.
yeah, something somewhere around there. All right. So we have some, very interesting things that have been seen in Roswell, New Mexico during the trial period for this cloud seeding operation. And I have one more clip that I want to show. This is from Patrick Humphrey's channel on YouTube, where he goes into more detail on SOAR and the House Bill 130.
So this is what's going on in Roswell, New Mexico. They are having major flooding. The town has been devastated. And police are even saying that if you leave, you might not be able to get back in. But it's been revealed, these documents, that they created this program in the last 2 years called the, quote, Interstate Stream Commission. They're even saying in their own documents here, the side effects are high winds, flood producing heavy rainfall, and severe thunderstorms, okay? And this is a side effect of the, quote, Seeding Operations and Atmospheric Research Program. This is the biggest flood that they've had since 1901, over 100 years since flooding like this has occurred. And nobody has flood insurance. Everyone lost everything. People are saying they lost everything in this flood. No one expected this. No one was ready for this at all. This is something that you do not expect in the high desert of New Mexico. Okay, this is 100% a real program. Here is even the application for the company that applied with New Mexico. It's called the SOAR application to Interstate Stream Commission, right? And this is the seeding program for SOAR, SOAR, which is the seeding program for New Mexico, right? The Seeding Operations and Atmospheric Research. That's the official name for it. Part A, pilots will conduct seeding operations only in the target area. They will be provided with aerial maps with the target area clearly marked. The operations director will advise the pilots based on the aircraft indicators from GPS of their proximity to the project boundaries. Clouds moving into the target area will be evaluated for seedability potential and for severe potential with sources noted previously, right? So they're saying that their pilots are conducting targeted cloud seeding operations, and they are using silver iodide to do it. And they only targeted these 5 or 6 counties, right? And one of them, Chavez County, is where Roswell, New Mexico is.
All right. So as he said, Roswell is in Chavez County, which has had a cloud seeding project going on for the last 2 or 3 years. And I did want to add that SOAR has been doing cloud seeding for over 20 years, and they claim that they've never had an insurance claim before this. However, now with all the major damage that's occurred in Roswell, New Mexico, as well as the 2 deaths, there were 2 deaths that occurred too. I wanted to make sure to add that. So there is almost undoubtedly going to be a claim being made for this flood, and SOAR would hopefully be held liable in this suit. All right.
Is that
So now,
in reaction to that law that requires any company that's going to do weather modification to apply with the U.S. government?
well, so they do have to register their activities with NOAA, but
Mhm.
they also have to have been approved by the New Mexico legislation. And it looks like the legislature approved it back in 2022, and they began operations. And then their contract was renewed again this year. However, there were 2 counties that were exempted from the operations due to their protesting of it. So there was a lot of opposition from those 2 counties, and they were actually removed from the experimentation list. So those 2 counties actually kind of, I guess, won the battle, as you could say, against weather modification.
Mhm.
All right. So now, while all this was going on, there was also major flooding in British Columbia, especially on the island of Vancouver, especially the city of Vancouver. So the city of Vancouver actually experienced, I think it was it was around 67 millimeters of rain, which is 2.6 inches, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that was just in a 24-hour period. However, in the 48 to 60-hour period that the storm lasted, they received in excess of 100 to 200 millimeters in some places. So that's 3.9 inches for areas of Vancouver, but then in some of the higher elevations, they received up to 7.8 inches. And it did also, once again, there was 2 dead. There was originally 1 dead and 1 missing, but the missing person has been found and declared deceased. So now I want to show some of the flooding in British Columbia. So this is a driveway that is being overflowed with like a waterfall from the deck or the porch area there, and it's flowing right into the driveway into a waterfall right into the driveway. And we also have roadways that were flooded so deep the cars were floating away. This guy you can see is still sitting in his car. I don't know why or what he's waiting for. Maybe he's just hoping to float to higher ground.
I was wondering that too. And I think all his windows are up, because this is a video that I thought copyright would be a problem. But yeah, he wasn't trying to get out. So I don't know what happened.
He wasn't trying to get out. And I did watch the video, and it did look like he was floating towards the grassy area at the side. So maybe he was waiting to float to higher ground to try to get out. So that is a possibility. And if you're trying to float in a car, I guess you would want to leave the doors closed and the windows up until you get to higher ground, if you know you're going towards higher ground. Yeah. Otherwise, there was a lot of people in not just Roswell, but also in BC who had to climb out of their cars and get on the roof and waited out on the roof. In Roswell, over 300 people were rescued. And in British Columbia, there was, I don't have the exact stat, but there were, again, hundreds of people that needed rescued from their vehicles and their homes. And then I have another picture of a van in British Columbia. So this one is flooded completely up to the windows. And it looks like the person rolled their window down and got out. And we don't see them here. So hopefully they've escaped and they're safe. One more image of the roadways in British Columbia. It's really unadvisable to try to drive through deep water. I've done this myself and regretted it. So yes, if you flood the engine, you're going to cause a lot of damage, but you can also get swept away as well. Both of those things actually happen to me. So I do not recommend it. If you see deep water, turn around, don't drown is the saying that they have. So I'm still sticking with Vancouver for a second. I want to show some Vancouver rain totals. So this goes back not the entire year, but over the last few months. However, this October 19th was a record. It was an all-time daily record for Vancouver. They got 67.1 millimeters of rain, which, like I said, was about 2.6 inches of rain. And due to the topography and the contour of the land, it was a flash flood in the low-lying areas. So Vancouver set a record. New Mexico, or Roswell, New Mexico, set a record. And also, strangely enough, on Vancouver, this was their election day. So last Friday in Vancouver was their election day, and the storm began early in the morning that day. So before most people had even woken up to go out to vote, there was already water pooling on the roadways, and it ended up becoming a flash flood situation within a matter of hours. So it looks like it may have actually affected the voter turnout in British Columbia. And I think, Tracy, you had told me that there's going to be a delay on the election results as a result of that. So
yeah, well, I got a comment saying they're not going to release the results till like the 25th, which isn't too much later than the 19th. But I don't know when the scheduled announcement was supposed to be.
Okay.
So maybe they're buying time. Yeah.
So hopefully that time that they're buying is for the purpose of casting votes and not necessarily recounting the votes. Because, in an emergency like that, people even trying to go out to vote would be risking their lives, because 2 people in Vancouver died and 2 people in Roswell also died as well. But we do have some good news, I guess you could say, from Canada. And speaking of the elections, it looks like the Conservatives are actually in the lead, and Justin Trudeau is actually losing this election by almost 20 points. And so I know there's a lot of people in Canada that are going to be happy to hear that. However, who knows what could happen. I wouldn't put it past these liberals to try to pull something at the last minute. So just keep an eye on that.
I did read, I didn't record anything, but it looks like it's more likely the regional election for the governor, or they call them the premier. Seems like there's a really tight race there. So that might be more, because if Trudeau's leading by 20 points, and
Losing by
supposedly he's
20.
he's not even doing his job. He's doing such a bad job that I think people are trying to get him out, but they're just like, wait
Oh,
for him to
yeah.
get voted out. Kind of like the situation we have, in the US. But thought it was interesting. They're having a very similar kind of political system, except they're being honest and showing that Trudeau is 20 points away from the under the conservative.
Yeah. So it's very unlikely that Trudeau could win. However, like you said, the premier race in that province is one to keep an eye on because it's so close. All right. So now we've also had, coincidentally enough, around this same time, there was more flooding in Australia. And so this shows the storm coverage in southeastern Australia. So this affected mostly Victoria, but it also affected New South Wales and some of Queensland as well. The worst of it was actually, so there was 3 or 4 deaths actually that occurred in the Sydney area. There was a mother and her 2 children that were drowned. There was another man who was hit by a tree that had been uprooted and floating. I don't know if it fell on him or if it was washed into him, but so there was at least 4 deaths in southeastern Australia that we can account for. Southeastern Australia, they received over 30, I think it was like 30 some odd millimeters of rain in the Sydney area, but Melbourne actually did get the worst of it with, the worst of the cities, with 1.4 inches of rain, which would be 37 millimeters. However, there were some areas in New South Wales that where the snowy mountains and the western slopes are, with 78 millimeters of rain, which is over 3 inches of rain. And once again, on those western slopes, the topography and the contour of the land actually channels the water into the low-lying areas, which receive flash flooding that can occur within a matter of like 15 minutes or so. So sometimes, you think you have time, but then 15 minutes later, the road may be impassable. All right. So I want to go into some of the general terms that we've been hearing lately, one of which is called atmospheric river. This is the term that we hear mostly in the United States, and they are also using this term in Vancouver, Canada. However, I've also heard the term wild storms and wild floods, and it's just weird that they call things wildfires, wild storms. So it's weird that they have to use the word wild. But anyway, here in the United States, we're hearing the term atmospheric river. And atmospheric river is a relatively new term according to Google Trends. It was relatively unknown before December of 2020. And then in 2021, we had a couple of spikes, and then again in 2022. And then this year in 2024, earlier this year, I think it was around March or April, we had another spike. And that was actually the peak for the interest in the term atmospheric river. So it looks like this is a relatively new term ever since 2020. And it's just probably another one of those new meteorological terms that they had to come up with to explain some of the new phenomenon that never occurred before, such as gravity waves, atmospheric rivers.
Kona low. Is that
Kona low?
Yeah. That didn't really catch on. At least doesn't seem like it. I also want to mention, I got at least one comment about, I think they were from the New Mexico area, saying that if it does rain and flood in that area, it's almost always in the spring. So for there to be this much rainfall and flooding in the fall is very unusual. I thought I'd mention that.
Yeah. And that's all I have for today. So back to you, Tracy.
All right. So maybe we'll just like recap, because I know we're probably gonna try to make the election connection, and I know a lot of people are doing that in the Asheville, North Carolina area, saying that this is to get in the way of voting and to throw the votes off. But it doesn't seem to be helping the liberals as far as the flooding and the hurricane damage. It seems to be making more people vote conservative. So I don't think that has anything to do with me personally. I don't think that has anything to do with the flooding. I think they happened to be able to do it when they did, and they were able to send it up when they did.
Yeah. Well, it did make it more difficult to vote in those areas. However, I think perhaps, an unintended consequence of the flooding there was that those areas actually voted, they turned more red. So everywhere that there was a flood, those areas actually turned out and they voted more red than they might have otherwise. So I know we saw that in North Carolina. So some of the counties that were hit by Hurricane Helene up in North Carolina, the early voting polls are showing, Trump with like a 20-point lead.
Is North Carolina normally a swing state? I know South Carolina is.
It can sometimes be a swing state. I know they have a Democratic governor, and they also have very Democratic cities. Their big cities are Democratic, and Asheville is actually very liberal too. However, a lot of the rural areas in North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee are very, very red.
Okay, I think it is a swing state because it has all those cities that are liberal, but a lot of the country, most of the country is conservative. And then, yeah, what do you think is going on with Italy and France? I didn't really look into it, but
okay, so
that's just weird that it's happening at the same time.
Yes, and I kind of saw that one coming, but didn't pay that much attention to it. So back during Hurricane Kirk and Hurricane Leslie, which were hurricanes in the Eastern Atlantic that never reached North America, they actually turned back towards Europe. However, I can't remember whether it was Kirk or Leslie. They were actually doing, experiments on those as well. So you had the German counterpart to NOAA and the French counterpart to NOAA were both modifying one of those storms as well. And those are one of those storms that curved up towards the English Channel and struck France and Western Europe. And so it looks like, they're probably only allowed to modify storms that affect their own areas. So like France is only allowed to modify storms that reach France, and Germany is only allowed to modify storms that reach Germany. So it looks like we've seen Germany and France both modifying storms that did reach that area. And now that was, I saw that over a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now. If you guys want to check that out, Monkeyworks US actually did cover that in one of his videos where he was talking about NOAA and how they were modifying the storms over the Atlantic.
Something that I do find also very interesting, another huge coincidence, is 2024 has the most international elections, most elections in this year than any other year, I think, in history. So a lot of countries are having their elections currently and very soon. I think the US is one of the last countries to do their election. So it almost seems like there was this like dash to get it done before, the changing of the
regime change.
The regime change. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to get one last thing in case they lose their ability to do it soon.
Yeah, well, maybe this is the October surprise that the liberals had alluded to.
Floods all over the world.
Perhaps.
And there's been many famous floods in history. So I don't know if this would be considered a global flood. No.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that this was the biggest flood this is the biggest flood that Roswell has had in 123 years, the biggest flood that Vancouver has had in over 80 years. And I'm not sure about Australia. I know that they did break, records, but I'm not sure how long those records, have been. It wasn't. Australia was I guess you could say, the least of the flooding as far as the rainfall totals. However, due to the topography, there are still areas that were affected just as badly. And every one of those areas that we covered today, they did lose lives.
Yeah, probably more than we're actually getting word of.
Perhaps.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Hopefully not. All right. So I think that is going to do it. Thank you so much, Shane, for putting all this information together. Although I did do the Roswell stuff, the Roswell images this time, but thank you so much for putting everything else in. And a shout out to Into Thin Air. He's been really on top of all these things, because I was kind of wondering when he was going to put something out about the next hurricane that's coming. Anyways, thank you guys all for being here. Please subscribe before you leave, and like, comment, and share this video. And we will see you all very soon. Bye.